Hi everyone, in this video of Accelerated Chess Dragon, we're going to be looking at a game played by Nigel Short and Jan Timman. This was played in the 1991 Tilburg Interpolis International Tournament in Tilburg, the Netherlands. And without further ado, let's look at this game. Nigel Short has the white pieces and he plays e4. Knight f6 by Timman, the Alekhine defense, e5, knight d5, and now d4. d6, and now rather than playing c4, which is the usual move in the Alekhine, Short plays knight to f3. And after knight f3, Timman just plays g6. He's getting ready to fianchetto his bishop. c4 and knight f3 are both okay moves. c4 is more principled, just controlling more space with your pawns, but knight f3 is just developing a piece, so it's also not a bad move. g6 by Timman, and now bishop c4 by Short. Attacking the knight goes to b6, attacking the bishop, and now bishop to b3. So Short is pressuring this f7 pawn. Should the knight on b8 ever move to d7, there are always tactics of bishop takes f7 check, and after king takes f7, knight g5 check. And the position just gets so interesting from there. Bishop to g7 was played by Timman, and now queen e2 by Short. Knight c6, and now both sides castle, and h3 by Short. He's just preventing this bishop from ever coming to this g4 square, and indeed that bishop coming there is a big problem, because followed up with knight captures on d4, it can really do a lot of stuff. It can either force you to maybe play bishop e3, or it could force you to maybe double your pawns in some cases. So h3 just defending against all of those. a5 and now a4 by Short. a5 was trying to win the bishop pair with a4 followed up, which after a4 would force the bishop to go to c4, and then after knight takes c4, queen takes c4, Timman obviously has the bishop pair. So a4 by Short, just giving a square to his bishop and also preventing a4 by Timman. And now an exchange on e5, and the knight comes to d4. An exchange on d4, and the rook comes to e1. So here, Short has almost developed all his pieces. He just needs to bring this knight and bishop into the game, and then he's completely done with his development. And here Timman plays e6, which to me honestly doesn't look like a very good move, because it's blocking the bishop, which could really have potential on going to this f5 square. And if the bishop goes to f5, and if Short doesn't like the bishop on that f5 square, he could play g4, but now we can see that this weakens his kingside a lot, and this bishop to f5 move was just a provocation. And after the bishop comes back to d7, look at the kingside. Bishops can move backwards, but not pawns. So bishop f5 is what I think was a better move. However, Timman instead decided with e6. And now knight to d2 by Short. Of course, he's trying to play his knight to the f3 square. And now knight to d5 by Timman. Of course, he's trying to put his knight on f4. He's also just getting his knight onto a very nice central square, which does control a decent amount of good squares in white's territory. Knight to f3, queen c5, and now queen e4. And now queen b4 by Timman. And here you could win a pawn with bishop takes d5, and after e takes d5, queen takes d5. But after bishop to e6, Timman gets a very good amount of development for his sacrificed pawn. His bishops are active. Short did not want this to happen, so he did not go for bishop takes d5. Instead, he played bishop c4. And now knight b6 by Timman. You could move the bishop to d3 and then exchange queens, but Short instead plays b3. And b3 does compromise his pawn structure, but it also is threatening this bishop to a3 move. And after knight takes c4, b takes c4, you can see that Timman is left with a bad bishop. It's locked in, and this bishop is also locked in by this e5 pawn. Yes, the f6 break can do something, but for the moment, Timman is playing with very bad bishops, whereas Short's bishop can come to this a3 square, and, well, that's just basically a very good advantage. Rook to e8, and now rook to d1. The knight on f3 could move at some point, so just making sure that you don't lose a rook, the rook comes to d1. Queen to c5 was played, and now queen to h4. And here, the pieces are trying to come into the position, and it looks like you can play bishop takes e5 in this position, but if you do this, bishop to a3. And after bishop a3, there's not really a good way to defend this position. You have to find a way to save your queen and your bishop, which is not possible. And after queen c6, for example, knight takes e5. So, not capturing the pawn, but instead playing b6 by Timman. He's freeing the b7 square for his bishop, and he should soon play f6 and create a pawn break for his dark squared bishop. And once that bishop gets active, black will have two dominating bishops. Bishop e3, and now queen c6. And now bishop to h6 by Nigel Short. He's trying to trade the bishops off, and that would be very nice for him, since this fianchettoed structure that Timman has, once the bishop is gone, Short's pieces can just start flooding the position. So, bishop to h8, avoiding the exchanges, and I thought that a move that Short could play is something like bishop to g5, and then bring his bishop to f6, because then there are ideas like knight g5 coming into play. However, instead of going for all of that, he instead went for rook to d8, which is trying to, one, take advantage of his opponent's weak back rank, and two, just bring both of the rooks to the d file. Bishop to b7, and the other rook comes to d1. Bishop to g7. Timman needs to alleviate some of the pressure by exchanging the bishops. Although it is kind of bad since his dark squares are very weak, but this is better than having a completely dominating position for Short, even though Timman does have a nice square bishop, which is restricting the movement of this f3 knight. I mean, that can be taken care of with moves like queen g3, later on maybe queen g4, so not a very good idea by Timman. Rook 8 to d7, and now rook f8. And here, Short just exchanges the bishops, and now rook 1 to d4. This is a nice rook lift, and it's preparing the move queen to f6 check, followed by something like rook g4, and afterwards, an attack with h4 and h5 could proceed. And now rook a e8. So, guarding the e7 square, which could be a nice square that Short could have used for infiltration. And now queen f6 check, king g8, and now h4. So, Short is trying to play this h5 move, and if Timman doesn't react, then he could even just get his pawn to h6, and that's checkmate. So, he would have to react to this by capturing the pawn, but then, obviously, the position is wide open. h5 by Timman, just preventing h4. And here, the plan that Nigel Short had when he saw this position is just incredible. King h2. Now, king h2 is a very nice move. The idea is to bring the king all the way into this critical h6 square. I mentioned that black does have a lot of dark square weaknesses, and by playing king h2, white is taking advantage of it. Timman didn't realize this at first, but after he saw a few more moves by Short, he realized that Short is trying to bring his king into the game. King g3, and this is only when Timman is realizing that the threat of king f4 and then king into h6 is very strong. So he plays rook ce8, getting ready to meet king f4 with bishop c8. But this is what was played, king f4, and even though he does have bishop c8 eliminating this d7 rook, Short doesn't care. He plays king to g5. And here, Timman resigned to the game, because no matter what he does, it is simply lost for him. If he were to play the move king to h7 here, then a very nice tactical blow by short. Queen takes g6 check. The king will have to go to h8. Queen h6 check. King g8. King to f6, and this is simply over. So king h7 doesn't work, but what else do you have? You can't prevent the king from getting to h6. And even if you try preventing this earlier by immediately playing king h7, this doesn't necessarily work because rook takes f7 check. And after rook takes f7, queen takes f7 check. It's like king to h6 or king to h8, it doesn't really change much. Rook to d7. And here, Timman would be forced to give up his queen because there is no way to really prevent either queen g7 or queen h7. So it doesn't matter how you slice it, but any way that Timman tries to defend against this, he is simply lost. Whether it be rook c8, king h7 immediately, Timman is lost. So after this rook c8, Short demonstrated this nice plan, and it's just a brilliant plan, which I really do admire from Nigel Short. So I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you have any suggestions or feedback for me, please let me know in the comments section, and stay tuned for more chess.